My name is Aaron Preston. I am a senior engineering manager at American Express, and tonight I am going to give you all a brief introduction into Swift charts. Before I jump into things, I wanted to give a little background on why I put this presentation together. There were three primary reasons. The first, I wanted to learn Swift UI. I originally put this deck together a couple of years ago at my prior job. And at that job, I was an engineering manager. And as most of you know, managers don't get to code as much as they like. So I figured I left my job to do a little traveling. So this seemed like a perfect opportunity to kind of learn Swift UI. The second reason, along the same lines, I wanted to work with async await. Just like I hadn't learned Swift UI at the time, I wanted to work with Apple's new concurrency framework. So this also seemed like a good time to do it. And finally, I wanted to investigate the charts framework, which is kind of what this presentation is about. The last project I worked at my previous company, we were integrating a third-party iOS framework into our app. And I had a lot of fun like being able to play around with it. So I thought it'd be interesting to dig into that. So when I put all these kind of things together, I decided to create my own app called Friar Tuck. As you can see, it is definitely not a ripoff of Robinhood. And as we kind of go through this presentation, I'll be pulling out little pieces of it from this app that I created. All right. Let's start with the basics. You're going to be working with three kind of buckets of data types when working with charts. The first is quantitative. These will be your numerical values. Some examples of that would be sales, temperature, stock price, and some of your data types will be like int, double, decimal. The second bucket will be nominal. So these will be your discrete categories or groups. Some examples of that would be a name or product type. These will typically be a string data type. You typically use these for something like bar charts. And the third would be temporal. So this will be a point or interval in time. Obviously, some examples of that would be a day or transaction time, and you'll typically use a date format. The second thing you need to be aware of are marks, and marks are basically what takes your data and transforms it into something visual on the chart. There are a number of marks that you have you can use. The first one would be a line mark. This will give you your typical graph. An area mark will do the graph, but provide shading underneath it. A bar mark will be what you use to create basically a bar chart. You would use a point mark if you wanted to do a scatter plot. A rule mark basically allows you to graph between two segments. A rule mark can be vertical or horizontal. There's a rectangle mark, and you could use a rectangle mark to do something like a heat map if you want. And then introduced in iOS 17, there's a sector mark, which is kind of, as you see, kind of your typical donut graph. All right, so let's see how we would actually use these. You start with basically a chart view that you would put into your Swift UI file. You're going to want to loop through your data. So you'd use something like a for each and loop through each data point. And very simply, you just add a mark. In this example, I use a line mark. You give it an X and Y values. Those values typically take something called a plotted value, and all plotted value is a data type that takes a label. So that's why you see the date and then the actual value that you're using. So also date for the X value. We're going to get into modifiers a little later in the presentation. But in this case, a foreground style will color your mark. In this case, I made it green. And when you run all this, you'll get something like this. So this was great. It was also very, very easy. And when I got to this point, I was like, all right, what more could I do? For those of you that have used any type of financial apps, you might have, especially if it's dealing with a stock, any type of stock, you've probably seen something called a candlestick chart. So what is a candlestick chart? A lot of the data, that, especially dealing with stocks, comes back in this format called OCHLV. It's short for open, close, high, low volume. And basically what that does is for every stock and for every date, it will give you the opening price, the closing price, the high, the low, and the volume. As mentioned, it's a typical financial data format, and it looks like this. And kind of, I guess, if you look at it, you'll see that it is a composition of a rectangle and a rule mark. It's a vertical rule mark where the high and the low, that's your rule mark. And then the rectangle mark is basically between the open and the close. And that basically gives it the candle part of it. One interesting piece of candlestick is also that, like, if the closing price is less than the opening price, you typically give it a different color. In this case, it's red. And then if it's the other way around, you would give it a different color, green in this case. So let's see how we would do that. You would start with your candlestick mark. It'll conform to chart content, like pretty much everything that you put into a chart does. Your mark's going to need a data point, so you give it a data point. You have the body, and then within that body, you just give it a rule mark. In this case, I want it vertical, so I have the X is the date, and this is that line. So the start and the end will be the low and the high. And then I give it a color of gray. And then just add a rectangle mark. Again, the X value will be the date. The start and the end will be the open and the close. And then I gave it a little bit of a fixed width of 5 pixels so that, you know, it kind of gives that bulge. And then kind of like we talked previously, the color, the foreground style, if the close is greater than or equal to the open, make it green, otherwise make it red. And when you kind of put that in, you'll get something that looks like this. I will let everybody figure out what happened like around here this year to the S&P 500, but moving on. Chart customization and styling. We talked about it before, but foreground style, you use it quite a bit as a modifier. If you add something like purple, you would get a screenshot that looks like this. Chart axis is also very useful. You'll probably have noticed that in a lot of my screenshots, you didn't see an axis. That's because I made it hidden. If you make it visible, you would get something like this. Another useful modifier are chart scales. It takes a domain and a range, and basically the domain allows you to give you the domain a min and a max. So for example, like for this chart, it goes up to like 635 or something like that. You don't want it to go run from 0 to like 650 because you're going to have a lot of dead space. So the domain allows you to kind of cut things off within the chart. And one useful thing for the range is that you can give it a plot dimension. So you'll get a start padding and an end padding. And that allows you to kind of pad the chart a little bit. And I use that in my candlestick chart to provide a little space at the bottom where I could put my volume. So I get the candlestick, and then you can see the volume at the bottom. One of the last things to talk about, annotations. Every chart needs an annotation. Within the context of charts, the annotation in this example from one of the Apple apps is that average on Wednesday, 88 sales, 52 sales. That basically it provides some textual representation as you're kind of dragging along the chart. I'm not going to lie to you all. Prior to iOS 17, you had to jump through a number of hoops. You had to add the chart overlay modifier, give it a geometry reader, basically create a clear rectangle, give it a gesture recognizer, track all the starting, stopping endpoints. It was a huge hassle. Luckily for us, in iOS 17, Apple gave us chart selection. And basically what chart selection does is you give it a bindable value, and this kind of works. It handles the gesture recognizing for you, and it reports back that raw value. One of the problems with that raw value, though, is it may not correspond to a point within your data set. So to solve that problem, what I do is I create a computed property called selected date. And basically all that does is it takes your raw date. So if it's being reported back, so basically if a user is dragging, I basically find the nearest date within my actual data set. So that gives me back a point, and it allows basically some snapping within the data set, which you'll see later in one of my examples. And then the actual view itself, basically within the chart, I see whether that selected date is a nil. If not, I create a vertical rule mark I give it a color, foreground style of gray, and then I provide the annotation. And the annotation takes it takes a couple of parameters. One of those parameters is overflow resolution. And basically what that does is it tells the annotation, like, how do you handle the edges in either directions for the X or the Y axis. There are a number of strategies that can be used. I used fit to a boundary. So in this case, fit to chart, but there's fit, there's disable. There are a number of strategies you can use. And then one of the other options or one of the other parameters is just you give it the view for the annotation. In this case, I just gave it text with basically a caption font. And if you do that and run it, you'll get something that looks like this. And here you can see kind of we're dragging along the chart. There's the text, which is basically the date. And as it runs up against the side of the right side of the app, you can see that it doesn't go over. And if you go on the left side, it also doesn't go over. And that's all handled for you through the overflow resolution. And then if we change it to a candlestick chart, this is where you can kind of see the snapping between the data, I guess. And that's where kind of that computed property was useful. All right. So some final thoughts. As you can see, this was easy to add. I would highly suggest adding it to your app if it makes sense. It makes your app more visual and interactive. We didn't talk about it much, but you do get accessibility out of the box, like most Apple frameworks. And then some other things that you might be interested in iOS 18 plus, they gave you the ability to do function plots. And basically function plots are what it sounds like. It allows you to chart things like a sine, a cosine, and a distribution. And basically for every mark, you'll have a corresponding plot. So a line mark will have a line plot, an area mark will have an area plot, and so forth. Another interesting thing is you got vectorized plots. And basically vectorized plots allow you to graph large sets of data. So when you're talking like 10,000 data points in that type of size, Apple has set things up so it's done efficiently. There are some drawbacks, and the drawbacks is mostly, well, a lot of it is with marks, you can customize each individual mark with modifiers, while for plots, you're more customizing the whole chart itself. So there's a little bit of a trade-off. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say that in iOS 26, they added the ability to do 3D charts. We didn't talk about it, but you now have the ability to do that. And that's it. I would say that if you're interested in learning more, the WWDC talks, we've done several of them over the years. It is a completely great resource. And thank you.
Okay, we can do Q&A. We have one question from Ed.
Yeah, the question was, how do you plot two different data sets with different scales on the same chart?
That's a very good question. I think you have to. I think you have to. Actually, I don't know. I don't remember. It's been such a long time since I set this up. Does anyone happen to know? Go ahead.
I've done it with donut charts before. I just did a Z stack and did put like two donut charts on top of each other.
Any other questions?
Okay, so I'm just curious. Last time I played around with this, the axes, labeling them was a little difficult for me. Like if I wanted to do anything customized with that, do you know?
I stayed away from labeling. I think I ran into the same problem you did. So, plus it looked cool without the labeling.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, for the section where you talked about sort of the snapping behavior and the new modifier in iOS that they gave for the raw selected date, how is it computing? Is it just basically computing, oh, here's your start date, here's your end date, here's sort of like the percent that you're to the right, and therefore we're just going to give you a date?
No, I basically took that raw value and just that bind. It's a bindable value. So that raw selected date is a bindable, so it's always being reported back. So when you drag, it's being reported, and then basically it just.
I guess my question is, sorry, I think maybe I'm phrasing my question wrong. you know, is the raw selected date, you said the raw selected date doesn't come from your data set, why would it?
Because you can think of it as you're dragging along the chart, I guess. So it's like just a point along the X and the Y axis. So like say your data point was between like 2 and 5, you might be dragging at like 4, I guess. You know, so that doesn't necessarily, like if you have a point at like along the X axis at 1 and a point along the X axis at 10, you're dragging along. It's just reporting where it's at in the X axis. So you have to actually find what's the nearest one. Does that make sense?
I see, so that's all gonna work, your data is like.
Yeah.
Basically like a double in Word, that's what's not good.
Yeah, or whatever you're using. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Jacob is going to join me. He is a designer behind the new design and a good friend. We have been working on that for a few months now, and today is a big reveal for us. So again, as you can see, I'm so excited. But it's a lightning talk. We're not going to spend too much time on it. As you all know, this is a meetup for iOS developers, and we talk about like technical stuff. But I wanted to share a few numbers. First, iOSoho turns 12 this month. The meetup started back in November 2013. I myself was an attendee back then. I didn't go to the very first iOSoho, but I went maybe in the first year. I don't know exactly. And ever since the first meetup, maybe I had 4 lead organizers, and I'm one of them. At the 4th one, I joined like maybe as an organizer. I don't even remember, 6 years ago maybe. During those 12 years, we have 131 meetups. Back in the early years, it used to be once a month, and since the pandemic, it's been a bit harder, but we're working really hard to get back to a monthly cadence. More on that soon as well. We have over 3,000 members. Not everybody is active, but over the years, we had a lot of people joining the meetup, and some of you have been around for many, many years. So thanks for keep coming, and thank you as well for the rating meetup. I did a rating functionality somewhere along the way, and most of our attendees are pretty happy with the meetup. They give us great ratings and happy with the quality of the talks and all of that. So it makes us really happy and makes us want to keep going. So again, when I shared those few numbers, I thought it was fun as an intro. And now going into the actual talk itself and the redesign, I'm going to start with reminding all of you, so some of you have been around for a while, what we used to look like. This is our logo that was created by the first organizer of iOSoho, Mark, if you remember him. It was done very, very quickly, and we never changed it. We use the Swift logo itself, was using this is template for the banner, and on the left, that's the main banner when you go to iOSoho, meetup.com/iOSoho, which is a photo from a talk so many years ago by Neil, if you know him, Neil Kemet, who he gave a talk about contributing to Swift, and that thing had been here for so long, I just forgot it existed. So all of that is gone now, and we have a new logo, and we have a new banner, and I want to give a huge thank you to Jacob for the. And I'm gonna pass him the laptop so he can take it. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll stay down here so I don't block the screen. All right. So yeah, hi, I'm Jacob. I've been a designer for, I don't know, 10, 15 years out here in New York. I worked at a lot of startups, agencies, whatever, done it all. These days, freelancing, usually on projects a bit more lucrative than Meetup rebranding. No offense. But obviously when Paul came and asked me to do this, super happy to help. Basically, the brief was pretty simple, like create a new logo, obviously referencing, Apple, Swift, WWDC, like other, Apple asset, Liquid Glass, like new stuff coming out. Finder, which will be a big sort of inspiration, weirdly, at the end of this. New York imagery, like whether that's landmarks like the Statue of Liberty, Empire State, obviously attempting to maybe be more appropriate to the Soho name itself, but outside of maybe Washington Square Park, some arches, cobblestone streets, not a whole lot to really go on that one, but
Okay, one thing I forgot to say.
Sure.
The name iOSoho is
Ah.
because the meetup used to be hosted at this company called The Ladders. It's in Soho, and for the first few years, the meetup was always happening at that company, that office. And only a few years in, with the original founder of the meetup decided to take it on the road and start to go to every company out there in the city. I didn't put a number to that, but we've been to at least 20, 30, 40, maybe different companies. We visited all the tech offices in New York, which was really fun. But that's the history of the actual name of the meetup, and we haven't changed it, as you know.
Thought you were gonna get into the iOS Oho aspect of it.
That was not my decision. I don't want to get into that.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, that was another just like challenge when it came to, rebranding. Like, can we rename it? Can we double up on that S? And obviously, like, there's so much investment in like just how long this thing's been around, URLs, meetup links. Like, we're not going to change that. We're going to stick with the standard thing. So we started exploring like several different options, playing around with typography, playing around with different New York imagery. Do I have a, like trying to utilize the train sort of branding, playing around with that whole Apple glass, liquid glass, like the WWDC, some of that stuff, the gradients, this really cool Statue of Liberty imagery, which I think we all started to like and started to evolve on. This one was fun because it read Soho and then iOS was sort of hidden in there backwards, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, which was really cool to make. So yeah, anyway, we explored a lot of different things and sort of just kept coming back to like the basics and keeping it simple. Obviously, the Swift bird being, what it is. And again, like I said, back to this Finder thing, sort of discovered as playing around that like those sort of transformed into this. The Finder face really lent itself pretty well to this Statue of Liberty mark that I was playing with. And then that naturally evolved into like, okay, well, what if I just take that face and sort of throw it on the bird and add an outline, which is sort of all we did, but obviously like there's a lot of steps to that. And then we sort of voted internally as to which one we favored. The bird made more sense just given recognizability and what this meetup is, and therefore started pushing forward with that. And, just expanded the brand, wanted this to be versatile, wanted it to be brought over like that blue from the actual Finder, kept with the Swift orange, made different versions, this outline stroke, how it looks on different colors, the vertical, horizontal, the badge in the middle there, the whole I heart New York. I don't know what you'd really say in place of that bird, but it's a cool image. Yeah, I Swift New York. But I was so New York, exactly. And then, we also built some icons to go along with all of this, which I think Paul was very excited about. Oh, I thought you threw that slide at the end here.
No, but at the beginning,
Okay.
you can go
Well,
back. Go back to the banner.
Yeah. Which, he wanted to utilize, sprinkle around. Also, obviously, community and meetup being like a big part of this. But yeah, that was the gist of things and a quick little wrap up, I guess. It was fun. It was cool. Hope you guys liked it.
Thank you, Jacob. I saw Cassie ask about merch. Great idea. We don't have a budget for it, but I think about it. If you want to chip in, we can, and we should have stickers at least with this badge. That would be really cool. Food for thought.
Let's talk about the unexpected power of augmented reality and AI systems. Okay. Once again, I am Trevor. I'm an iOS developer and design engineer here at Arena. I've been making iOS apps for about 10 years now and a ton of AR apps. So, yeah. Okay, cool. So what do we do at Arena? So basically, the way our clients operate, they work in they are focused in the automotive industry and manufacturing, and our primary task is to help them repair and basically just repair their vehicles for let's I don't want to use any names, so I guess we'll just call them Mercury. That's the company that we work with. So one of the major pain points that they expressed to us is that the technicians that are, like working on site, they sometimes have difficulty locating components and wiring routes within their vehicles. And being that being the case, technicians usually like spend a little bit too much time of making repairs within these vehicles, which then translates into like cosmetic mutilations, and which is very costly. And by mutilations, I mean like scratches, dings, scuffs. These things cost a ton. So basically, like our challenge is how do we translate like 2D information into 3D space? Okay. All right. So that's kind of where we come in. So our AI model basically generates troubleshooting plans for their vehicles. And basically it helps it walks the tech through certain troubleshooting certain parts of the car. And basically it combines critical diagnostic information with spatial visualization using AR. And I will just cut to this. And this is basically a quick demo of our early build of our Atlas mobile app. So basically there's a few things happening here. Basically what's happening is we use the Apple Vision library to get the orientation of the vehicle. We then show in an AR overlay over that vehicle, and we use the troubleshooting plans provided by Atlas to then kind of like power the view, the AR view. So right here, you'll see that there's a car overlaid another car in physical space. You'll see some of the components that are mentioned in the documentation. You'll also see some annotations, and also you'll see a highlighted like 3D component that will be located in that car. This is not that car, this is my car. So yeah, so it's not gonna line up just right, but it works pretty well. And as you can see, there's like a documentation and some types and images associated with that. All right, so how does it work? Multiple frameworks, one AR experience. So basically, we use Blender, Reality Composer Pro, and of course, Xcode to kind of bring everything together. So first we load in the CAD model. One major thing is we have to make sure that most of the components are named correctly so that it matches up with the components in the troubleshooting plan. This way, like as soon as we get a new troubleshooting plan, it'll kind of recognize exactly what components are reflected in AR view. From there, we export that as a UXDZ file. And from there, we export it into Reality Composer Pro, where you kind of make your file checks, and then you make your file export. Which is, it's a good software, but it's not really the best for modifying your 3D models. Let's see, and then from there, we export it to Xcode. So once in Xcode, you kind of just make sure everything kind of looks right, maybe scale things up or scale it down, and then you would place that AR model in physical space. Yeah, all right. So there are a few problems that we ran into with our initial prototype. One major issue was that your device overheated, which is not ideal. And also like the app also, the performance dipped drastically. So there'll be a lot of jitter, and it greatly reduced it in frame rate. And we were able to like pinpoint exactly what happened there. So first we reduced the polygon count In Blender, we decimated the model, so we basically like reduced the amount of polygon counts that was associated with this 3D CAD file. We took it from 180 megabytes to 36 megabytes, reducing by 80%. But that wasn't the issue. We actually found that it was the materials that was used for this CAD file. I guess like changing the opacity on such a complex material is what really like kind of like throttled the device. So basically what we did was we swapped out a ton of materials with simpler materials. I think we found like maybe like 60 materials that were not being used. So we got rid of that and we swapped them with some simple materials. And that was basically it. So from there, we were able to get the app to where it should be. And this is that same app that works well and is running smoothly. So yeah, that's basically good hand over to Daniel.
Cool. Before I take over, do people have any questions specifically kind of more on the AR, VR part of it? Go for it.
How long did you run before you either got into either overheating issue or?
1 minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, but that was a fairly like simple fix. As soon as you fix it, then
Okay, right.
yeah.
Are you using the Vision headset with this?
Oh no, I'm using or I.
We have looked into that. The problem is the actual environment where we're deploying this. It's not exactly safe for people who are in a factory setting to be using that. Much more realistic for us to have. They need to have all their senses available.
So from like, I tried it a little bit and it seemed like for an AR overlay, you kind of need reference points. But when you get like too close or too far, you get inside the car, like how do you maintain that?
Right. So basically, you're able to kind of like maintain that relativity, I guess. If you just set that, sorry, I'm blanking. So basically, the way we do it in this app, or at least the previous version, we have a set space or a set anchor in space. So basically what we did was we used there's a barcode that's over every car. And we were able to like measure the distance between the iPhone and the car, and we're able to like place it exactly in that space. So when we were able to like walk around the car and kind of like, use the app, like it usually stayed in place. But if you were to use like image tracking, it probably wouldn't work at all. Yeah.
How many different car models do you have to support?
Right now, we're using
It scales pace.
And this product, it works a lot faster than a person would having to look at each car. It
Correct.
speeds the process.
Correct. I mean, that's the part that's the intelligence layer that Trevor's spoke about briefly, kind of the Atlas intelligence. The idea is that it helps the technician actually identify where to go. So part of it, what they see are maybe just error codes. And what we're able to process from that is actually where in the car is the problem, and through AR show that problem so that they can identify it faster.
And my last question is, you mentioned that you would have a stationary point where from that stationary point, I guess it makes it easier to scan and have a look at the vehicle.
Mhm.
But I was concerned with, for example, one of the examples you showed, there was a lot of reflection. And I wanted to know, did you have any problems trying to eliminate these visual mirages?
No, basically like, so what we decided to go with is use our world anchor. So basically like it sets a focus point in the AR space or AR world, whatever. And you'll be able to like walk around that car and it would not really move. It wouldn't really shift that much.
Yeah, because it's stationary.
Yeah.
Okay. So that thing does the work. One guy with one of those with that on a phone does the work of 10 guys, something like that.
Sure, let's say that. That feels like a good number.
Does it need like interference from a engineer who knows a little bit, or like somebody who doesn't know anything can still use it and get their way through? Just like AI, basically. If you don't know, they can generate stuff which is totally irrelevant. But is it something like that? Like, or do you need some kind of experience to use this?
More geared toward the latter at this point. We are geared towards specifically technicians who are actually trained to work on the vehicles, and what we're providing them is actually very tailored intelligence, and the models are trained on what they already know. But it's not, there's a version of this that we could build in the future that is like educational and more for novice, but this is kind of not what this is geared toward.
How granular are you going?
Basically, I guess you can identify a fuse box, but can you track the brown wire that's coming out of the fuse box?
We get down to pins, we get down to wires, we get down to voltages on the pin.
Wow.
You have session persistence, like, can you come back and see what a previous engineer saw?
Yes. Good questions. Cool. I'm going to switch gears completely. So if you're good with AR, I basically accept that AR exists at this point. Cool. So now I'm going to talk kind of at a broader, from a more zoomed out perspective. We have this idea that this works. And again, for our purposes, our code name Mercury, this works for them. They use this product. But our reality is that now we're actually realizing that this is a problem that is not just for Mercury. They're not alone. They have we have other clients who similarly want troubleshooting field apps that they're going to be using. And so we are still only a 2-person engineering team. So our problem is, how do we start to figure out how we can actually build and scale this product in a way that we're going to be able to support this as this problem scales. And so to do that, one of the ways of thinking we have to change completely is that we're not building a product that is for Mercury. We're building a product instead that is an Atlas or Arena app that we are then distributing out into more individual products. And as part of that, I'll talk for a moment about kind of platforming, and specifically within platforming, the world of SPM, which is Swift Package Manager. I am completely stealing everything I'm talking about here from Airbnb, where I got to kind of be a part of their platforming experience that they went through 7 years ago. And it was a multi-year product plan that they went through, but it was basically, how can you modularize and Lego brick your code base? And one of the ways that I'll kind of go through a very simple version of it, and then I'll showcase a little bit of how complex it actually can get. But if you think about it in the simplest level, you have kind of layers of packages. And then specifically in our case, we are literally using SPM, and there's a reason for that. And I can touch on that if people have more questions on it. But these are actually individual Swift packages that are doing the work of grouping essentially your code. So for example, we have packages that are specific for API models, packages specific for extensions, packages that are specific for what I call base theming, and I'll get back to that a little bit later. And these packages are then depended on by things like services. So service layer packages are things like our services are things that are doing API and parsing, handling all of our UI routing. And that's a similar framework for how we're going to use it across any of our different now apps. Things like a haptic service is something that we can reuse and recycle. And then services are depended on by flows. So flows use these services, they use the same models, and we're able to kind of, using these Lego bricks, we're actually able to make it so that we're not building a product just for Mercury, but in doing so, we're actually immediately leveraging the fact that we're sharing most of that code across to another client as well. Effectively a version of white labeling. And I mentioned this, I'll just kind of preview this for a second, but this is a much deeper wire diagram that I've designed in the past for how these actually should relate to each other, who can import what are the rules of it, how do you avoid cyclical dependencies. There's there's much more depth in here that I think is worth this specific talk, but if people are interested, I can always jump back to the slide and kind of dive in. But there's enough to talk about, I think, from the kind of the high level. So back to this. So if we accept that we just have kind of flows, services, and foundations, our idea is that in taking those packages, we can actually make it so that those are shared. And in the future, as we're growing already, we're seeing down the horizon in the next few months, we might have a third app and a fourth app. And again, still only 2 engineers. So how do we support that and make it so that it's actually scalable and usable? in the world for us, actually, of what it means to create an individual app is the composite of these packages that are the shared code. And then we think of the layer of kind of the individualization of the app. So what is actually unique to the specific app? It'll be things like the actual three-dimensional models, which I use this little UFO for, the actual theming, and what we actually right now hack using localization, or the actual strings that are associated with that app. So what can we actually share between different apps? Like, for example, what is a drone in one and what is a car in the other? We're actually just using localization to make it so that it's easy to swap between the two. And we're using Twist pretty heavily. And Twist is making it so that we don't actually even have to manage any of our Xcode, any of our dependencies. I built tooling on top of it so that what we're actually generating is everything from what the dependency tree is, the packages it needs, and the actual project itself. And so to touch on for a moment, the other piece of it is within theming. We've built a theming engine where we don't have to worry about colors mostly in our app. You can basically plug in what is our primary brand color, what is our secondary brand color, what is our accent if we care about it. And the theming engine takes those, shifts colors as it needs for what is a body color, what is a title color, what is a caption color. And when used in code, instead of saying I want a background, I use these systems, and that allows you to actually, again, all I have to do to make another theme is basically define these three colors, and the rest of the whole coloring of the app will actually work. And then I touched on this actually already when I was talking about localization, but this is an example of kind of how we're using localization for cars versus drones. And then, yeah, that's kind of that. The last piece I'll touch on is what is not working at all. These are just kind of call outs. One is, for whatever reason, and I don't know why Apple designed it this way, but you cannot do the true North Star here would be that service packages that we've defined would come with their own unit tests. And in a CI system, you could run unit tests on those services. Completely impossible, unfortunately, at this point. If you depend on iOS specific frameworks like UIKit, you cannot have a CI system that is macOS agree that it should compile this for iOS. For some reason, it is just a gap in the way that Swift packages and Swift package testing works. They have a way to do testing, but you cannot run iOS native tests. The only way to do it is you can try to basically for each package ad hoc create a project and then run the tests within that project, but it's really painful and messy. And then the last one is we're unfortunately now realizing the pain of already going down this localization path, which is that we now have clients that are German, and we actually also need localization. So we need to figure out a way that we're going to be nesting localization. But yeah, that's I think mainly it. Any questions within that? If people are interested, I can also show a quick live demo, which is always fun and dangerous. What's up?
I was just curious about the tooling layer.
Mhm.
Can you explain what that is?
Which part? So when I was talking about with the Twist piece, I think. Yeah, so that's kind of what this demo I can show. I can show basically how easy it is for me to stand up a new target, which I'll do that in a second then.
Yeah, very basic question. Like, why did you prefer SPM over any other dependency manager? Is it like because it's the latest one supported by Apple, or is it like something better that is supporting?
It's lightweight, it's supported by Apple, and there was kind of this North Star hope that it would keep getting better. I also say that I got a lot of exposure to Buck, which was an absolute nightmare at Airbnb. It does it, but it's just an insane amount of overhead. Unless you have a CI team, I think it's impossible. My understanding is that's kind of within the world that's about the same unless you're dealing with something like SPF. Because we don't have a dedicated CI team, I think it's going to be hard for us to go to anything else. And it's written in a Swift readable language. So for iOS engineers, it's more palatable.
I want to time for the demo, but I have a question about the slide that said project generation. Just there was a tool to manage dependency graph. We have a bunch of questions about that Venn diagram of the dependencies. But there was a tool that was like purple. It was like a clamshell, and you said use that to manage your dependency graph.
Twist.
Twist.
Yes, Twist is a open source library that I think they're actually now also charging. Which I don't keep far back. They're also now I think charging for it, but I think the project generation piece is free.
That one, yeah.
Yes.
That's Twist.
Yes.
And that manages the packages in the or
Specifically as I can show you what it looks like basically. Within the kind of Twist, you describe these things that are basically brand helpers. And what the benefit is it looks like Swift, and it basically is just a command line tool that processes this And it pulls out the idea of kind of using Xcode configurations instead. And it's essentially turning these Swift files into Xcode configurations that can then be turned into an Xcode project.
Okay.
But it's not doing any of the actual dependency tracking. It's just kind of define what you want and it will make a project.
I have a lot of questions on how that massive dependency graph works, but that's the topic.
Yep.
Is it just like Xcode Gen?
Yes, it is a competitor to Xcode. I think it's a slightly better one, but it's they're synonymous.
So I think the localization hack is clever for like vehicle versus drone, but as you said, like you want to do it in a foreign language now. And so my question is, how might nested localization work? Do you have ideas on that? 'Cause
Yeah, basically we're going to define there's going to be a couple pieces to it. There's going to be the piece where, what is the piece, what is most of our strings that are independent of the actual client, like done buttons. That piece is what's important for English versus German, to use the example. So those files we can kind of compile as just English versus German. And then what it's going to be is actually, we're going to generate a localization file by taking the base and then taking the pieces that are separated and saying, cool, now join those and make a German one and make an English one. But it's tedious. not difficult, but tedious.
How's like the workflow in like Xcode if you need to, let's say, like add a property in a data model and then add it to the service and then add it somewhere else? Like it's all in different packages, right?
I'll show that at the end of the demo. That's a good question. I'll put a pin in that. Did you have a question also?
I did. I was just kind of curious. You're a 2-person team.
Yes.
Are you using AI or anything like that to augment your work? Okay.
It was 2025. And we are an AI company. I think it's kind of embedded as
how. I'm also curious about how AI. You haven't talked a lot about how the AI works with things. Well,
but there's like a difference of the way we use AI to build our stuff, and then there's the AI this company is built. So we are essentially a service for that AI.
Yeah.
We're not doing any local AI at this point. There's a couple of projects we're talking about that might end up being able to basically ship a lightweight model along with our app, which we'll explore how that can work. But for the purposes right now, we're a website that's loading that happens to communicate to a model.
There were some questions in the chat.
Sorry. What registration did you use to get alignment with the real car? So there's a sticker that the factory keeps on the car while it's on the production line. And it is always in the same place. It's what they use as they're kind of checking how the car is moving through the different steps. And we're piggybacking on top of that. Redefining AI, or did I miss the AI is under the hood. AI is the thing we're communicating with. It's not, I think that's it for those questions. Cool. I can do the quick version of the demo now at this point. The purposes of the demo, the idea is that let's say that we have the 2 products that we have right now, which is Mercury and Fermi, and we want to make a third one. And so I've set up a script that will basically help me do that ad hoc. And so what this is going to do is going to ask us for a name for this third target. So let's name it. Paul, do you have a name?
iOSoho.
I'll just say so. So I define that. This is asking me if I want to modify the bundle configuration. I'll just go with the default. I can change the color theming. We'll go with orange since that feels pretty close to Swift UI. I can define if I want this thing to be by default set up to work with stub data or actually communicating to one of our APIs right away. For now, I'll just say that it's going to work with some stub data while we're developing this. It's confirming what is there. It's going to generate some code. And then it's going to ask me at the end here one last question, which is, what is the thing that we're working on here? Is it a car? Is it a drone? Is it a boat? What have you? Anyone want to shout some object out? Perfect. Okay. So what that does is it's just doing a simple grep replace of kind of the localization file. And then now onto kind of how this looks in here. To your questions to kind of how is this organized? You can see here you have the packages on the left, and these are kind of, again, this is simplified right now for the purposes of this example, where you have Atlas Foundations, you have Atlas Services, and you have those. So if I needed to go and modify a model, I would basically just modify it here. That model is then already being imported into the service layer, and then I can use it inside of the flow layer as well. Yeah, and at this point, this is already a buildable target for Soho. Of course, it didn't build. Built before. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. Are there any other questions?
Is that project generation script completely procedural, or is there in some place where you're like, oh, I want a spaceship? Like AI is gonna, like maybe go through and like do the translations of spaceship in other languages or something. Like what?
I modified for the purposes of this demo to make it procedural, but actually the realer version of it is using an LLM to do exactly that. But it just takes much longer, and for the purposes of this, I cut it out. But that is the way it should work.
Got it. So like the project generation is fine to us to create your little export.
Yep. As long as you define all those small pieces, basically it has enough already at this point to go with what it.
What about like stuff like permissions and stuff? Like when you're asking, noting, hey, like this is gonna have a microphone versus this app is gonna.
You would need to define that in the tools file more manually at that point.
Okay.
Right now, that's kind of going off of a more base generic one, but it is all configurable in Toast. And I guess I didn't actually show, but basically within this one Soho thing, it has its own Soho theme now, and then it has taken kind of that orange. And if I wanted to make the Soho app look a little bit different, I would just tune these things. And I think from before, here's the localization file. You can see it already has spaceship kind of nicely set up in here.
So all the packages that you use, are these part of the, like all small repos, or is a part of the main repo itself? So main repo, so you can directly change it here and then push a version.
For the purposes of our team, we are small enough that it makes sense to keep it. You could see a world where as that grows that you would want to shift that, but for the two of us, it's easier if we're keeping it all together. Cool.
This question was actually like when you make a change in the, let's say the foundation SPM in like your generated project, is that going to be reflected to your other projects?
Yeah, it's all within one repo, so it is a shared thing. So if you have to think about, are the pieces you're working on something that you want to be shared, or should you be pulling this into the code that is actually more unique? And you could do work inside of this app piece that is actually now going to be unique to this app. If you're doing it at the layer of the packages, that is going to be pieces that are shared.
I see. So like let's say for this project, we need to make like two changes. One is like something in the shared SPM. That's like a different Git repo than
one repo.
So then like you make a change here, but it's in the shared like SPM. How do you make like now you open your other project and you have to make the same change?
It's a great question. For now, we are relying on the fact that it's a small team. Ideally, that's where you'd have the unit tests, and that's also where you'd kind of have some version of UI testing that would also help cover for it. But again, you can build more systems, but it's one of those things where you kind of don't want to overbuild the systems too early. Cool. Thank you, everybody.